Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to make a Halloween card, and I'm going to show you 3 very easy ways that you can color with alcohol markers. So if you have some alcohol pens and you just have never been happy with the results, or it just seems too complex, I'm going to break it down really easily, and then you can take the 3 techniques I'm going to teach you today and start coloring and have some really beautiful results. We're going to be using some new stamps from Craft, and these stamp sets are available exclusively at our sponsor, topflightstamps.com, and they're designed to work with the other Craft stamps that are out there. So we have this one here, and it's called Pilgrim. You've got Halloween costume parts. You have some like Thanksgiving parts. You got a couple jack-o'-lanterns, a Christmas tree, and a winter hat. You also have, from the new sets, we have this one called Sleigh, and it's all Christmas themed, so you can mix it with all of your other Craft critters to create some holiday themed stamping. So all of your fall and winter holidays, you're all set. So what I'm going to do is show you the other stamp sets that I have. We got the dogs here. I'm going to be using this dog from this stamp for our Halloween card, but there's lots of really cute options. My favorite is the cats because they're so sassy and they're so funny. And actually I was going to use that guy, and so I was kind of playing around with my little masks to see how that would look, but I just thought he looked so grumpy. He looked even too grumpy to be a Halloween witch, so I decided I would use the dog, but geez, it's still pretty cute even with a witch there. And we also have rats, which would be kind of funny, I think. And these would be actually really funny for Halloween because they're already kind of like spooky monster creatures. But I thought the dogs would be really cute today, and that's what we're going to use. So the first thing we're going to do is some stamping, and then we're going to set that aside, and I'm going to do some techniques with you, okay? Oh, and you can find all of these stamps linked up below in the video description, so you won't have to hunt for them, and you can go to topflightstamps.com if you are not watching on a computer, so that we can find it later on. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is some masking, so we need to stamp what's going to be in front first. So I cut my I stamp on a post-it note and I cut them out before I begin. And the reason I do that is so I can protect my paper as I'm stamping, so I can do this all in one layer. So let me get that dog stamp here and show you how we're going to work it. So I'm going to grab this stamp that I need out of my package. What I do is I either put some tack it over and over glue on the back, or I put cling foam on the back so that they'll be sticky, and I keep my stamps in the packaging that they're sold on because these are laminated on the back side for you to stick your stamps to, so it saves you from having to have something else to store it in, and I saved the cello bag for that as well. So I'm looking at this guy here and I'm thinking that the hat's gonna look really cute, and I like his ears poking through, but if you didn't like the ears showing up on the hat, what you could do is you could just stick a straight masking piece of post-it note there, kind of like that, and just mask off the whole top. But I like the ears poking through. I think that's kind of cute. And the cape is going to go sideways like that. So I want to make sure I realize that before I stamp, because I don't want to stamp it crooked. And he's going to be riding on a broom, but I will get him stamped before I stamp the broom, just because I think it's going to be easier to do it that way. So the first thing I need to do is stamp the cape there. Once I get the cape down, I'll be able to get everything else lined up. Now you could also stamp everything separately and cut it all together later. Now this tool that I'm using here, I've actually had for a long time. It's a Fisker's stamp press, and I'm using this because I know that I can kind of adjust it without dropping my stamp on my surface. So I'm just going to ink this up with Memento, and I'm using Memento because it's an ink that is not going to smear when I go to color it with alcohol pens. Memento is my favorite because I've used it forever, but there are others out there. There's a new Gina K ink that I think is supposed to be good for all coloring media. I haven't tried it yet, but I've heard some really good things about it. So I'm going to situate that over here. I'm just going to check the angle. I think I need to tip it up a little bit more, but I can do this because the little feet keep it from falling down onto my thing. And I'm going to scoot it down just a little bit to make sure I have room for the hat. And that looks like it's going to be pretty good. So I'm going to go, actually I'm going to scoot it down just a little bit more and tip it a little bit more. I think that looks about right. And I'm going to press straight down. The other thing I like about this stamping tool, and gosh, I hope they're still available, I'm not sure if they are, I think they are, is that it's a little flexible. So I'm working on my table, which is not perfectly flat, and I don't have a mat under it, so I know I can give it as much pressure. I'm sure if you have one of those new Misty things, that probably works. They're not even that new, I'm just so out of the loop. That would probably work just fine. I don't have one of those. I've never felt the need for one, so this is working just fine for me. And those were pretty inexpensive, as I recall. So now I want to stamp the hat. And again, I'm going to look at this. I'm looking at my guy here and figuring out how far away from the cape do I need the hat. So I'm just going to guess and eyeball, but I think it's going to be all right. I don't think it needs to be too precise. I could use a Stamp-A-Ma-Jig or something if I wanted to. And let's see, I wanted about probably 3/4 of an inch. Well, maybe like, my little thing is slipped, so I'm going to reposition everything. Okay, so I want that about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch above and at a little angle. So I want it kind of like that, I think. Oh, I hope I didn't go off the top. It's hard, if I don't have my head right above it, I can't really see, but if I have my head right above it, then you can't see. So I don't want to do that. All right, so I'm just going to give that a second to dry, and I'm going to put this guy on my tool here because I just feel like I'm going to get a better, I'll have a little more time to finagle it if I do that. And before I even ink it up, I'm just going to kind of hold it over and see. You know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to use my Stamp-A-Ma-Jig for this. Okay, this is a Stamp-A-Ma-Jig. It looks weird. You've probably seen it in the craft store for the last 20 years, but it is so awesome for stamping. So what I'm going to do is put my stamp here on a regular acrylic block. You want just a rectangle or a square, and make sure it's one of your thicker ones. If you do have thicker ones, it's a little easier. You can use any kind you want, but a thicker one's going to work a little easier. And then I'm just going to set this aside for a second. You get this imaging sheet, which is like some kind of like hazy plastic, and then you just want to put that right up into the corner there on your Stamp-A-Ma-Jig. And then you're going to ink up your stamp with any sort of water-based ink would be best, so you can clean your imaging sheet, because you only get one, but I've had this one going for probably 15 years and it's fine. And then you're going to stamp, you're going to make sure that's pushed right up into that corner. You're going to line your block up with the corner and you're going to stamp straight down. Okay? Now you're probably thinking, how on earth does this work? Well, I'm going to show you. Alright, so we're going to bring our paper back. Now I'm going to put my masks back on my thing to cover up the areas that I just stamped, and since I let it dry, I think it's going to be good. I think it's all dry. You could hit it with a heat tool if you weren't sure. And we'll put the hat over the hat. This is your basic masking here. Now, of course, if this seems like a pain in the butt, or you don't have the patience, or you don't have the tools, you can totally, stamp things separately and cut them out. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my imaging sheet and I'm going to lay it down here and figure out where my doggy needs to be. Alright, once I get it just how I want it, then I'm going to set my Stamp-A-Ma-Jig here in the corner again, so that imaging sheet is lined up in the corner, and this is on top of my paper a little bit, so it's going to hold it in place. Okay, so now I'm going to re-ink my stamp. Make sure I get a good inking so I don't have to redo it, although I could reposition it pretty easily if I needed to. I really don't like to, though. I like to get it in one shot. Put that right in the corner. Did I just move it? I'm just going to double check. I felt like I might have moved it, so I'm just going to double check. No, it's good. Okay, so that's a good thing. You can check before you do it. I'm going to put my thing in the corner there and stamp straight down. I think I did move it, but I think I moved the whole paper, not just the ma-jig. Ma-jig. Okay, and then when I remove this guy, see, everything's going to be just lined up and fine. See? So now what I want to do, I'm actually going to put this back on because there's one more thing I want to stamp here with him. And that would be my broomstick here. Okay, now I could mask off, if I had a mask done already of the dog's feet, then, I would put it down there, but I don't. I really think I can manage to stamp this without, going into the legs. If it goes over the tips of the feet, that's fine. And then this, I'm going to stamp straight down here. And there we go, and he is on his broom. and looking pretty darn cute. And I did get these these little pumpkins ready too. I didn't know if I might want to stamp them somewhere. I don't really have a lot of room for them, but I did want to do a demo with them. So I could stamp one on the broom, but I don't think I like that. Maybe I'll stamp them and cut them out or something as an embellishment. Let me think on that. Okay, I had an idea. I'm going to stamp the pumpkins like they are balloons that the dog is kind of dragging behind his broomstick. It might look totally lame. I'm not sure. I'm just thinking like party balloons. That's what I want it to kind of look like. So I'm going to stamp this one here. And I'm going to mask it. I'll stick that on there. And then I'm going to stamp the smaller one right next to it and draw some balloon lines. And use my Sharpie. And I'm going to draw it right to the thing on the broom there. I don't know, I think that looks kind of cute. Well, we're going to let that dry, and while we're drying, I'm going to show you some marker techniques. To follow along in this lesson, you're going to want 3 alcohol-based markers. You want one that's in a fairly dark color, like we've got there, one that's in a medium color, and one that's in a light color. So let me just swatch those out really quick. So this one is a light marker. These are all from my Ohuhu set of 100 that I just reviewed the other day. This is my medium color. And this is my dark, although it's not super dark, it's just kind of a little bit darker. Okay, so I've got three colors. They're fairly close together. I mean, there's kind of a jump there, but that's all right because you are probably not going to start off with 300 markers. You're going to have to make do with what you have. And you can use any sort of alcohol pens. It could be Sharpie, Bic Markets, Prismacolor, Copic, any of the craft store alcohol markers. You know, use whatever you have. If it has a faint odor of alcohol, then you can use that. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the simplest type of coloring, but it's probably the most boring. It is the just one color only. So I am going to use this color here that's in the middle, and I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can color all, you know, just one color. I'm going to use a chisel tip because I have a pretty big area. These are chisel and bullet tip markers. You could use a chisel or a brush tip for this, but you want one of the bigger tips if you're using a bigger area, a smaller tip if you're using a smaller area. So one way you can do it is you can do a series of straight lines like you might have done when you were a child, like coloring in a coloring book, and then I would recommend you crossing over those lines. And what you're doing here is giving a uniform outlay of color, and it is going to not be streaky as it dries. But another way that you can do it that I think works just as well is do little circles, and you're basically making several layers at once, but you're keeping that ink wet so it will dry without streaking. So either way, just try to make sure that you keep coloring out from that one wet edge, and it should color pretty well. If you find that you have streaks, you can always go over it again. This technique is nice for if you are either just unsure and you just want to get a color down, or if you're doing really tiny details because you wouldn't have enough room for blending. So if you're doing like patterns on something, or you're overlaying a pattern, where if you tried to blend, you might push your ink out of the lines, or you might end up just not having enough room to blend and just having everything turn to one color anyway. So that's your flat color. That's just done with one color. If I wanted just a medium green, I would just use that one color. But sometimes I want that medium green, but I want to have some highlight and some shadow too. So the first technique I'm going to show you is layering. And layering is great if maybe you have a large area to work in, or you're doing colors that don't want to blend together. Like purples and reds are really difficult to blend. So maybe you're using those colors. This works really well because you have a little time, and you're priming your area of the paper with your light color first, so everything's just going to want to blend a little bit more because you have some not water but alcohol there, and that's just going to keep the paper wet and keep your ink flowing and blending a little bit better. So you're going to start by doing a flat color with your lightest color. Then you're going to grab your medium color, And that one is 47 for me. The colors I'm using in this Hoo-Hoo set are 48, 47, and 46. 46 is your darkest. I don't like to mention the colors as I'm doing it because it is counterintuitive. You know, you wouldn't think that the higher number would be a lighter color, it seems like, for me anyway. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the medium color and color it about halfway across my color here. Okay, then I'm going to take my dark and I'm going to put it about maybe a third of the way. And if you're using a smaller area, use your chisel tip, your bullet tip rather. Okay, I'm going to do about half of that. So we've got that gradient. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in with my lightest color and I'm going to bridge the gap where those two colors meet. Color over that a little bit. And I can even go up as far as the darker one. Then I'm going to get that medium color and I am going to bridge the gap between the medium color and the darkest color. And I bring that all the way over the entire darkest area. And if you feel like you still need a little bit more blending, you can work back over with a lighter color if you need to. And once it dries, you'll have a pretty streak-free look. And it's still, you can see on the back, it's like saturated. The more blending you're going to do, the more you're going to saturate the back of that cardstock. Unless you have a bleed-proof paper, but those don't tend to blend that great. The last one I'm going to show you is actually how I tend to work a lot. It's good for colors that blend easily or for small areas. And so usually when you're stamping, you're working in small areas, so this is what I tend to do since I tend to use my alcohol pens for stamping. I'm going to start off with my lightest color, which is 46. And since I'm using a large area, I am going to do this with the chisel tip. And I'm just going to start in here. And I'm just going to do a little bit because, well, you'll see. It's going to be a little bit of a work to blend it out. Then I'm going to take my next color, the medium tone, and I'm going to color all over that dark that I just put in there, and then I'm going to bring it out. Okay, so I'm going to pull that color out with my medium tone. So it is going to pull that color a little bit, so that's why I didn't want to go quite as far as I might want the blend to go. And then I'm going to quickly grab my lightest color. Again, I am going to go right over that wet edge. And I'll probably even pull it back all the way through the blend. And then finish coloring my area here. And I can keep layering up in here if I feel like I didn't get a nice enough blend. And I could even go in very gently with that medium color again if I felt like I wanted just a little more color in there. Go in there really gently. So if you have a brush tip marker, it will blend a little easier. I will admit that. But your lesser expensive markers generally don't have a brush tip, so this is a great way to get those blends with inexpensive markers. And I use the same exact markers up here, so once they dry, they do get a little bit smoother, and you can get some really nice results. So now what we're going to do is grab our stamped image, and we're going to try those techniques I just showed you for the different parts of this piece. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit better so you can see. Another thing I wanted to mention is that your markers are going to work well together, okay? So you don't have to have really expensive markers to have them turn out really nice. So for the dog, I think I will do, I will layer. I'm going to start with 0.5 gray here, and I'm going to work with the bullet tip since I don't have a ton of space. And I'm coloring in little circles so I don't have streaks, so I get enough color down there. Now the lighter your marker, the more scratchy it's going to feel, and I think it's because of the higher alcohol content that it has, and the alcohol just kind of makes your markers feel a little squeaky. Now I can go in with my cool gray too and put some shadows there on that leg and behind, and put a little shadow under the cape here. And I really don't even think I need to blend that in. I think those colors are close enough that I don't even need to blend. Alright, and I'm going to do that for the tail and the face as well. I'm going to shadow with my cool gray 2, just like I did on the legs and belly. Any place I think I would have a little bit of a darker area. So when you're making big jumps in color, that's when you're going to have a lot more of the difficult blending and you're going to have to go back and layer. So just keep that in mind. And I think I will grab my next shade of gray, which would be a cool gray 30% or a cool gray 3. This happens to be a Copic marker, and that's what a brush tip looks like in case you've not used those before. And I'm just going to get those darker accents, just kind of layer those on the ears. And maybe get the nose as well. And I'm going to leave that highlight there. So if you don't have a huge jump, you don't really have to go back and blend. And I could darken up that back leg a little bit. So there, we did layering. We are going to, I'm going to skip over to one of these pumpkins because I don't want to go into the cape right now, just in case any of that ink is still wet. I'll get a feathered edge. So I'm going to go over to this guy here, the pumpkin and back, and we are going to do the dark to light blend. So I've got 3 oranges here. I've got a rusty color. I've got a bright kind of pumpkin orange, and then I've got a yellowy color. And I'm going to start here with this rusty color. And I'm going to put in my shadows where kind of the other pumpkin is in front, so this one would be overlapped a little bit. And I'm going to add some of this color on the edges, and also if I can see kind of where there would be like the, those lines on the pumpkin, I don't know what you call those, like the segments, I want to kind of bring some of that onto the segments as well. Oh, I don't know if there'd be a segment there or not. I don't think there would be. Now I'm going to go in with my medium orange here. And every company, except for like Grays, Grays are pretty standard as far as how they're named, but pretty much every company has their own numbering and coloring system. So your best bet is to swatch out your colors and then choose from your swatches. Don't pay attention to the numbers, just choose from the color of your swatches. I know some companies do have very smart numbering systems, like Copic is very, if you understand the Copic world, their numbering system will make sense, but that's not always how it is. Alright, now the next jump I'm going to make is going to be to a yellower color, but I also want to do that yellow over the eyes, like it's a lit up jack-o'-lantern, so I want to get this based in at least all with that orange, because this yellow is pretty much going to be an all over color because I want it to kind of be making the center of the pumpkin eyes glow a little bit. So I'm just going to use that as a little bit of a brightness. Now some of my darks just kind of disappeared there, so I am going to go back in with my kind of dark rust color, and while everything is still wet, go ahead and add some more shadows back in. Now you do want to kind of learn your paper, so if there's a cardstock you always use, you'll notice that some cardstocks feather more. Like if I'm using the Georgia Pacific cardstock that I would get at Sam's Club, I can't color quite out to the edge because I know it's going to bleed a little bit. So I would stop my coloring about like a 1/16 of an inch from the edge so the color could fill out. Alright, so now I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to use purples. Purples are more tricky to blend, so I'm going to do the layering effect, the layering technique. I'm going to start with my lightest purple here. This is number 4 in the Ahoohoos, but you could use whatever brand you have, and I'm just going to lay down some color. A lot of people say they don't like the chisel edges. I actually do like the chisel edges, but it's a personal preference. I like that I can lay down a lot of uniform ink at one time, and then I can go in and I can get into the details with the bullet point. I also like the chisel edge for blending because it's very firm and you can force colors together, and it's a very durable tip, so you don't have to worry about wearing down like your brush tip if you're using brush tip markers, or your bullet tip if you're using a bullet tip marker. It's a hard tip, but it's a durable tip. The bullet tips are hard tips, but I think they would wear down and soften up after a while, which you might actually like them better after they've softened up, but I don't want them to soften up, you know, too prematurely. Now I'm going to use my medium color, and I am going to use the bullet tip. I'm going to give it a little bit of shadow up here near the collar. Give some down here where the artist put the hatching lines. I could feel the paper is damp on my hand. It feels cool to the touch as I'm resting my hand on there. So, you know, that's a good way you can tell whether your ink is dry or not. I think I want to bring in more of this color, so I'm just going ahead and flicking it in. Now I am going to quickly go in with the dark, but you could blend it out with a light first if you feel like you don't have enough time to work. That's fine. You'll find your groove, but these three techniques will just help you kind of get started so that you can kind of figure out how you like to color best. It takes practice. It makes me so sad when people get frustrated and they never touch their supplies, or they get like a less expensive brand of marker. And then they said, well, that must be the marker because I'm not getting the effects that the YouTubers I watch are getting, so it must be that I have, you know, awful markers. And then they go and they buy really expensive ones and it's not any better. So it's, you know, there's such a learning curve. It just takes practice. So I'm going in with this medium color and the chisel edge just to lay down a good amount of ink, and then I'm going to go back in with my lights and blend it all together. Purple is a tricky color, so keep that in mind. Purple and red, those are the difficult ones to blend. But I think we're going to have a really nice effect here. And when you look on the back of your paper, you're going to see that it's got staining on the back, and that's how you know that you've kind of gotten into the fibers and you've really given that ink a good chance to be able to blend. Go tidy up and fill in a little bit. And once you do get to the saturation point, you want to be careful of the edges because you don't want to it to feather. Like, you don't want to have that kind of ruffled, you know, feather, just like that feathering. You don't want to have that on the back. But once you get to this edge, you don't have to go right out to the outside, but you can start to throw in some shadows, just kind of like some hatching, and stuff is going to blend a lot easier because you've primed it. You've wet all that paper. It's kind of like if you're doing watercolor and you wet your paper, then all of a sudden your paints want to flow together. So that's what you're doing here. That's what it looks like on the back. Once this is all dry, it's going to look a lot smoother. So keep that in mind. Now you can still use these colors and do the same effects that I showed you with a pumpkin, like up here in the hat. And I'm just moving it so I don't lay my hand on the wet paper, but you can totally do that, especially in a small area like this. Now I think I'd probably, like, say the brim of that hat, I would probably just take my medium color and just color that solid because I don't have a lot of room to blend here, right? So it doesn't make sense for me to put down several layers of color, because what's going to happen is there's not enough space to see that blend, and I'm just going to end up forcing too much ink into too small of a space, and I'm going to get feathering, and I don't want that to happen. So that can just get a straight color like that, and that's fine. Now that I'm getting up to this area here, the peak of the hat where I have more room, I can do my dark to light blending. It's not so much of a space that I have to worry about not having time to blend, even though I'm working with a tricky color. Since it's a small area, I can still handle blending in that area. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is, and I mentioned this like when I do jewelry and stuff, I generally would have my head directly over when I'm coloring so I could see exactly where the tip of that marker is landing, but I can't do that when I'm filming. So if I'm a little sloppy here, that would be why. I need to get my granny readers on, get my magnifiers. I don't have reading glasses. I can't find reading glasses at work, but I'm telling you what, I will use a magnifier. I like those helping hand soldering tool magnifiers because those work fabulously. And then sometimes you want to actually fill in the area and use your lightest color on top, but I think my lightest color is dark enough that I won't get a weird, I think it will blend all right. Oh, there we go. There. Now something else you can do for highlighting, after something's dry, like let's look at our pumpkin over here. If I wanted the like the front of the pumpkin to be a little bit brighter, what I can do is I can choose a lighter color. So I'm going to show you what the lightest color we have on that pumpkin currently is at 24 there. And that is in the eyes, and I kind of went over it to kind of lighten it. But say I want to highlight, I could grab, say, 37, or 45, and I could add a highlight. I'm going to grab 37 because I don't want to have a kind of a backwash. I think this will work really good for a highlight. And then what I would do is I would color in the area where I want to lighten it. You could also use a colorless blender, but I think it would just remove too much. And I can color over the area and it will lighten up my ink a little bit. Can you see that? I was able to brighten up that center spot there. Hopefully it shows up on camera. I think that I actually will use this light inside of the mouth and the eyes here and use my other colors to blend. And since that's lighter than anything else I'm using, I can sloppily color it in. Another thing I want to mention is that if getting around those edges is taking too long and making your blends not smooth, you can color really sloppy, willy-nilly, and cut the thing out when you're done. So that's another tip that I have for you. So I think I'm going to grab some brown and just kind of give the straw here in this broom a little bit of body here. Let's see, this color looks like it would be good because it's kind of a nice earthy brown. And you can look at, sometimes your stamps have like shading already done, and all you had to do is put just a wash of color over them without even any blending, and it's going to look fabulous like this. I don't really need to do anything else to that because of all the shading that's done from the stamp. So keep that in mind too. If you're feeling overwhelmed by, you know, coloring, do you have some stamps that already have the shading done? Then you can just do like a wash of like a light color. Just color really gently with a light color, and that's all you need to do. So it doesn't have to be difficult. Make it work for you. I am gonna do the stem on my pumpkin, kind of like an olive color. These, a lot of times your markers will have a band on the side that's either your bullet or your brush end, because that's probably what you're going to use more often. So that's nice to keep in mind. And the other thing I want to mention is that when I'm working with my markers, I generally have them in a dish or a cup, tip side up, so I can see what colors they are. But then I turn that bag on its side when I store it, or I store my markers in a rack so that they're lying horizontally, so that way both ends get inked up and we don't have any dry markers. I'm also going to use some of that yellow. I'm going to use the kind of golden color here to do the band on his hat, and that should be dry enough there. I'm just going to color the whole thing one color because it's not that much space. And I could also do a little bit of pink for his tongue and his ears. I recommend that when you get markers, you swatch them out. They don't have to be fancy, but just swatch them out so you can see what your colors look like. Because look at this color. It doesn't look quite like that, right? So you want to have an accurate color key. Otherwise, you're going to end up grabbing colors thinking you got one thing and ending up with something else. Now, since these are small areas, I'm not going to blend them. I'm just going to color it and let it be. So those three methods of coloring really will really do the trick for most of the projects that you're going to have. And it's definitely a great place to start if you've been confused about how to color in the past. So we're going to do a pumpkin here with the dark to light technique, which is my favorite because it's so darn fast, and I'm usually coloring in my, my stamped images, so they're smaller. So we put our darkest in. Whoops, that's not even my darkest. I grabbed the medium. But that's alright, because I can go right over it with the darkest. See, it's very forgiving, even though it can feel kind of scary at first because the colors might not want to blend and your paper might not be just right. But you know what? You can use even the cheapest of cardstocks, but just get used to it. Just give yourself time to get used to it. I will say the Nina Classic Crest cardstock is my favorite and the easiest to blend with. That's what I'm using here. But I used the Georgia Pacific from Walmart and Sam's Club for quite a long time before I switched over to Nina, and I was actually fine with using that, but then some stamping friends were like, no, you've got to try this, and then I did, and then I was like, whoa, that is so much easier. It like blends itself practically. So so I would recommend that if you've got the money to spend. It's unfortunately you can't just run into a store and buy it unless you have like a copy shop nearby. You gotta order it. So that's kind of the bummer. I didn't go dark right on the edge here that was overlapping this guy because I wanted it to have a little bit of contrast there. I'm just being careful. I'm coloring over the darks and I'm bringing it in. Trying to keep these, I'm trying to work fairly quickly so the edges stay wet where I'm coloring. So when I go to my next color, It'll look good. And I'm doing the inside where we can see the kind of the inside of the pumpkin wall there. And then we're going to mix in our darker color. I look for contrast. It's like if I know I have that light yellow around the eyes and mouth, then I kind of want to get that orange right up next to it, because I want to have that contrast of the orange against the yellow. So now I'll grab this golden yellow here, and I'll fill it in and blend it into the orange next to it. I don't have to go over all the pumpkin. I just need to kind of pull it into that orange enough so that I get a nice blend. And I can go over some areas if I want to lighten them up a little bit. Like here on the edge, if I want to lighten that up, I just go over it with this color. And if I look at it later, I'm like, oh, it's not as light as I want it to be, I can always adjust it a little bit. Something else I like to do with my images here is I like to do a background and I like to do some highlights, but you've got to make sure your ink is dry before you do highlights. I want to do an inked background, so I'm just going to grab a piece of scrap paper and put my my image on top, and then I'm going to grab some tried and true distress inks, and I over inked my ink pad and I had it storing on its side, so holy cow, this is like super juicy ink here. Wow, I've got to clean out that drawer. And I'm just going to dust on first some tumbled glass, because that's really light, and I feel like even if I got a little overboard with it, I'm not going to have any real issues. Plus, when I use a blending brush, I find that I have a much smoother ability here. So I'm just going to start kind of on the scrap paper and dragging it in. You could replace your masks if you were worried about accidentally getting on your image, but this is pretty, when you use a blending brush, it's pretty easy. It usually goes where you want it to go, and it's such a soft, subtle look that even if it overlaps a little bit, it kind of adds to the atmosphere, and it doesn't bother me. Oh, see, that's what happens when you start on the paper instead of starting on the edge and sweeping it in. Not a big deal, but don't do that. Learn from my mistakes. And I'm just going to tap a little bit between his legs there. And there we go. Okay, and now I'm going to grab a little bit of purple. This is called Dusty Concord. I'm just going to pretty much get the edges here. I wanted the light color so I could kind of go right in and around my my stamping and not worry about it so much. This could be sent as a postcard for Halloween, or you could mount it onto a card. Either way. And I'm also going to add some of this darker faded jeans. Faded jeans. I do not know my ink names. And see, I think that you get kind of a pretty effect when you layer up all these colors. You just get a more rich, deep background. And then if you do make a mistake, you do have something that doesn't look quite blendy or right, it's alright, because it kind of fades away. And when we do our highlighting technique in a minute, if we got a little bit of ink on our subject, it's not a huge deal. And I'll try to sneak it in there. Sometimes I keep some little stencil brushes around for that, but I don't have them right here on my table. All right, now what we're going to do is a little stenciling. I'm actually going to leave that open, and I've got a couple star stencils here. And what I'm going to do is just sponge, and I can see through my stencil enough that I can tell where I have my critter there, hopefully. So I'm going to try not to stencil on him, but of course you can use your mask if you're afraid that you're going to end up dabbing ink somewhere you don't want it. So if you can't tell exactly where you're sponging, it's probably a good idea to use your masks. I'm using a homemade ink dauber here. It's just a makeup wedge glued into a bottle cap. It's very fancy. Ooh, I love that. Oh my gosh, okay. And I do like to reposition my stencils around so that I can have the right holes where I need them. The nice thing about this handmade one is that I get a straight edge on one side and I get a rounded edge on the other, so I can kind of turn it so I can get just what I need. I collect stencils because they're so handy to have when you're crafting. They're so versatile. You use them over and over again, and something like stars is not, it's not something that's going to go out of style. I'm going to shift it over a little bit so I can get that star there. And there. Now if you do use ink on your stencil, make sure you clean it. You don't have to clean it if it's paint because it's not going to get in another project, but the next time I use that stencil, it surely will get some of that ink on there. So now I can either mount this on a card or leave it as is. Now we're going to put our card together before we do the highlighting because I think it's a little bit easier this way. So here's our image that we've colored. I have a 5x7 card here. I have a 6x6 paper pad with some really cool Halloween images. It's from last year from AC Moore. I think they still have it. I'm not 100% sure though. But what I wanted to do was just kind of cut it down to the height of the card. So if this is a 5-inch high card, I have this cut to like 4 3/4. And then I am going to tear it. So the part that I'm going to have on the edge is going to have a white stripe on it like that. So it looks a little kind of vintage and eerie. And let's see, you know what, I think I'm actually going to trim that off a little bit so I have those owls on the side. Let me do that. There. So if I'm only going to have a little bit show, I want to make sure that I get to take advantage of most of the paper. Okay, it's asymmetrical, but I think that's fine. And I haven't stuck this down to the card. I just have everything laying on it right now, just as a guideline here. Can you see that? I'm going to put the black mat underneath again, just so you can kind of see the edges of the card. It's just going to help me get it lined up, because I don't want to stick it down yet, because I want to wrap some washi tape and I want to be able to tuck my edges under. So this is just giving me a guideline here. So that's one way that you can deal with those 6x6 paper pads, which are, the scale is perfect for card making, but if you make 5x7 cards, it's like, it's just not quite big enough, not quite long enough. So this is a way to deal with it. Oftentimes these companies will have mat stacks, which is a 4.5 by 6.5 card. It's meant for scrapbooking, but it's perfect for backing your or matting layers on your cards. So I thought this was really cute. I've had this washi tape forever. I think it came from the Dollar Tree or something, and I just want to see if I can do like a little strip of it or something, which I think I can. I think I'll go close to the bottom. Well, maybe up here though, so I can go in between there. I never seem like I have enough room, you know? It seems like I've left all this room, but then, nope, I don't really have enough room. Let's see, what do I want to peek out there from the end? That little ghost is pretty cute. Try to see what's gonna hang over. And then I wrap the edges around, because washi tape never really sticks that great, so I don't want to have it, come up on somebody. And then I can adhere the back and go right over that washi tape, so there's no way it's going to come loose. This is going to be a top fold card. Okay, now before I stick this guy down, I think I want to ink the edges a bit. I'm just going to use whatever I have left in the sponge just to give it a little bit of rouging here. And then I'm going to stick this down. I'm going to center this up so I can see some of the little ghosties on either side. If you had any brads or anything to add, then that would be really cute here too. Now for highlighting, you can use a gel pen or a white paint pen, just something opaque. Gel pens are probably the easiest things to come by, and they work really well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just look anywhere that I think I would want a little bit of a highlight and go ahead and add it in. You could also use like a sparkly gel pen and get a little bit of a cool effect that way. I like the idea of the glittery pen, so I thought I would look through my stash. I've got some metallic ones, but I really wanted the glittery. Oh, right here, glittery, glittery. Here. These are by Color It, by the way. I'll link everything up, like always. If I forget, just let me know. Oh, but this is really pretty because it's really sheer. And you can go in and give it that magical sparkle. You could even use a clear glitter pen to do some like magical dust kind of coming off the broom, because witches are magical, so they would have the magical dust. And this can also help if like things just look a little too plain and flat and boring. It can give you a little bit of pizzazz. Just that little bit of glitter, I mean, that just makes it kind of it gives it some movement, makes it sparkle. This pen here is called the Stardust by Jelly Roll, and it's the ink is clear, but there's super fine just sparkles in it. It's kind of like a champagne sparkle, so it's not like silver, but it's not as gold is, so it's just kind of fun. I'm gonna put some kind of coming around from there, and just gives it a little bit of a sparkle. And how fun would that be for a kid to receive? Another thing I want to share, because I like to do one layer cards, I like to do all my stamping in one layer. I mean, just because I don't like to cut stuff out very much. Something you can do if like maybe you were a little shy to get too close to your image, you can go in with a colored pencil, probably before you do any little sparkly lines, just because it's you know, because your pencil is going to catch on those little bits of glitter. But just use the edge of it, very light pressure, and just go in and just kind of give it a little bit of a shadow. It can help bring it, like, make it blend into your inking that you did in the background, and it will help, like, especially when you have something like this white dog, it'll help him stand out. I didn't add any light color to the tail, just that gray that we used on when we first colored it. And that's what I thought I might do, just to kind of pop it out, is add a little bit of chalk or something, like some white chalk. But then I realized if I just go in with a indigo colored pencil, super light pressure, I can just kind of shade around it and make him stand out a little bit more. So kind of just keep contrast in mind when you're coloring, and that's really going to help. So like, and when I say keep contrast in mind, it's think of what's going to make the other thing stand out more. So like, I used that brighter yellow here because I didn't have enough contrast in there, and that guy doesn't look very lit up, so I want that contrast. Just like I used a shadowy rusty color right there on that side a lot, because I knew I was going to have that side a little bit brighter to stand out on top. So, you know, keep that contrast in mind. You want blending for sure for some areas, but you also need some contrast so that things can stand out. And I don't need to do this everywhere, but here and there is nice. I actually like the fur having a little bit of that blue on it from the dusting, because I feel like it gives everything that same local color, meaning like it's dusky. When you're outside and it's dusky, everything kind of has that tone to it. Just like if you're outside when the sun's setting, everything gets that golden tone. I'm going to keep it light around my pumpkins because I would want it to feel like they're maybe illuminating the sky. Now, I like stuff that can kind of help me fix mistakes. So I made a mistake when I went that dark inside of that pumpkin. So what I'm going to do is use this opaque Posca pen to color in the mouths here, and that's going to help them be a little bit brighter. And of course you could use a colored pencil because they could be pretty opaque depending on the brand. Prismacolor is pretty opaque. I'm going to go ahead and add some of that in here too, just to make them match a little bit better. But also, if you go outside of your lines a little bit, like I will if I don't have my head right over my coloring, it can help fix stuff a little bit. And these are just great to have with all of your artistic endeavors. I think I use these a lot over watercolors and other stuff. It's nice to have a little bit of an opaque option sometimes. And then like the white pen in this is just as good as a white gel pen. In fact, I probably like it a little bit more even. I'm going to add some little highlights on my pumpkin here. I would just try to kind of look at the edges, maybe highlight the just like the shape, just kind of like the light is catching it. And you can do a few more little highlights over here if you want to, but you know, that's all up to you. You can do as much or as little as you like, and you could do more shading on the dog if you wanted to. If you wanted to have some, you know, brighter fur highlights on there, you could definitely go through and just kind of do little choppy marks and kind of highlight the fur a little bit. It's completely up to you. But hopefully this helped you understand how blending and shading work a little bit with your alcohol pens. Please practice. Just draw some boxes and practice your blending. Make blends, make recipes. So if I say, oh, I like these green colors together, I'm going to write those down so I can come back to it. So make yourself a little recipe guide. Make a square, do your shading and blending, and if you like it, write down what you used so you can reproduce those results in the future when you're trying to do some coloring. It's just as valuable as having a swatch right in your bag, and I recommend that whatever you have for markers, it doesn't matter if they cost pennies a piece or if they cost, you know, several dollars a piece, make a swatch. It's really going to help you more than anything that you can buy, you know, to improve your coloring. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I had so much fun bringing it to you. If you want to find the stamps I used, you can get them at our sponsor, topflightstamps.com. These stamps are by the company Quetzalcraft, which is a company out of France, and they just released 2 exclusive sets with Top Flight stamps, so that's the only place you can get them, and it makes your other stamps more useful because there's cute little outfits for the fall and winter holidays that you can put on your little Quetzalcraft animals. So it's a lot of fun, and I think you'd enjoy them. Oh, I also found that I had these little embellishments here. There are these little buttons, and I thought I'm going to put this little spider button right there in the corner so I have something that's a little textured on there. I think that's kind of fun. You can let me know what you think in the comments below. Another tip for those markers is that you can use them. I haven't used this purple one in a while, so hopefully it's in good shape. You can use them to do like the strings on buttons. Yeah, that needs to be primed and shaken, so I'm just going to grab this white one. So you could like draw in like little stitching marks, so it's kind of a fun thing to do when you don't feel like threading up a needle. But there you have it. Please give me a thumbs up before you go, subscribe for more videos, and until next time, happy crafting.